Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. There are reports that 400 people were killed following an attack on a refugee camp in the north end of Gaza. Israel's prime minister explains why the ground offensive continues against Hamas and why his country will not be part of a ceasefire right now. And a number of premiers are not happy that only Atlantic provinces appear to be getting a carbon tax break on home heating. Political reporter Brian Lilly will have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. An explosion at a refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip has allegedly killed 400 people and destroyed as many as 20 homes. Now, that's according to the Hamas-run Gaza Interior Ministry. Those numbers have not been independently verified. Israeli warplanes and tanks continue to strike the enclave as Israel rejected calls for a ceasefire. Footage from various news outlets show craters where buildings once stood and piles of rubble surrounded by partially collapsed structures. Dozens of rescue workers working with the military were digging through the wreckage, searching for survivors. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explains why his government will not move forward with a ceasefire in Gaza and the West Bank.
Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen. Israel will fight. Since October 7th, Israel has been at war. Israel did not start this war. Israel did not want this war. But Israel will win this war.
Many families are pleading with the terrorist group Hamas to release their relatives. Around 240 people were kidnapped when Hamas attacked southern Israel on October the 7th.
וסבא של אמיליה, בת 5.5, שהיא הבת של דניאל, ויש גם את החתן דוד, שחתום נציגי משפחת טרופנול.
הלב שלי כמעט פסק. גם אני וגם אשתי היינו מצד אחד עמומים, ומצד אחד הרגשנו הקלה. הקלה שהיא בחיים, ואנחנו רואים אותה.
Israelis with ties to Canada, who are related to those kidnapped by Hamas, are pleading with Ottawa to advocate for their release. The families praise Canada for its support, but want the world to press harder for Hamas to release the hostages.
Unfortunately, his father got murdered. The army found his body right by Gaza, and the rest of the family is kidnapped by Hamas. We saw a video of Safir getting kidnapped by Hamas terrorists, and we saw how they brought her to Gaza, and we saw civilians, how happy they are of this, and we saw civilians punching her, throwing things towards her, and just looked like it's a celebration for them.
23 days, their children are being held hostage by terrorists. Now it's just wrong. I don't think anyone that we talk to can, with a little bit of humanity and the ability to listen, can disagree with the fact that this is just an atrocious crime.
A new report by Release International says Iran, which is allegedly supporting Hamas, is now putting pressure on Christians to keep away from the country's hijab protests. It's warning that Christians who are arrested could face sexual assault in prison. Andrew Boyd has more now in this report.
Iran has been accused internationally of being broadly complicit in the attacks by Hamas against Israel. Iran denies that, but is said to provide financial and material support for the Islamist terror group. According to news reports, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, said he kisses the hands of those who planned the attack, while denying playing a part in it. Iran has its own internal conflict as citizens protest the enforced wearing of the hijab by Iran's morality police. Christians in the country are coming under pressure to boycott those protests. Those who take part have been arrested and some face sexual assault in prison, according to a report by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Since the freedom protests began, Iran has detained some 20,000 demonstrators and killed at least 530. According to USERF Commissioner Susie Gelman, Christians report they're getting pressure from the government not to participate in the protests. If they do and they're arrested, they are sexually assaulted in prison. USERF say a Christian woman who was detained during the hijab protests was held at Evin prison. Her interrogator told her, "You thought because you're a Christian, you can do whatever you want and remove the hijab." He then sexually assaulted her. Over the summer, Iran detained almost 120 Christians in raids across 11 cities. Many have been jailed because of their involvement in the underground house church movement. Christian leaders and pastors have faced torture and imprisonment, and their families harassed. Many have fled the country. Iran has banned church services in the Farsi language and speaking about the Christian faith. Christians who do so can be accused of inciting violence. They have also been whipped for taking communion wine. Despite the oppression, some say there could now be 1 million Christians in Iran. The church is thought to be one of the fastest growing in the world. UK-based Release International has launched an appeal for Christians in Iran and around the world who've been driven from their homes to avoid persecution. This is Andrew Boyd for the Global News Alliance.
A former NHL player who was slashed on the throat from a skate blade has died. A warning now, the video you're about to see is quite violent and graphic. 29-year-old Adam Johnson, who was playing in an elite hockey game for the Nottingham Panthers in England, died after a skate blade from Matt Petgrave of the Sheffield Steelers cut his neck following a collision. Johnson was rushed off the ice and received immediate treatment, but later passed away from his injuries. South Yorkshire police are investigating the incident to see if in fact was intentional. The Panthers Hockey Club called it a freak accident and are, quote, truly devastated over it all. Johnson played for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL from 2018 to 2019, scoring a goal and adding 3 assists in 13 games. Students at Lewiston High School returned to class following a mass shooting which left 18 people dead and 13 others wounded. It was the worst mass shooting in the state of Maine's history. The alleged shooter, 40-year-old Robert Card, was found dead over the weekend from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. One student says the shooting affected so many families in his community.
I mean, I'm happy to be back, but I'm also worried about my safety and stuff here. On my football team, one of my coaches lost four friends. One of my best friends, I went to Arbor, lost one of his best friends. And my mom's friend got shot 4 times, survived, and saved a bunch of kids at the bowling alley. So, yeah, I'm kind of going through a little bit too. So, I mean, it's a matter of time just to be, try to act normal again, try to act like everything's fine, but like everything's not. But try to act like it's okay,
Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says if Alberta pulls out of the Canada Pension Plan, it would be disastrous for the rest of the country. Freeland says she's been hearing concerns from a number of Canadians, including Albertans, and most want to stick with the CPP.
The Calgary Chamber of Commerce has said that altering Alberta's pension system could compromise labour mobility, stability for businesses and consumers, and investor confidence. The Alberta Federation of Labour has said that the proposed move to a provincial pension plan would be, quote, truly scary for anyone contemplating a safe and stable retirement. Protecting the pensions of all Canadians is a priority for our government, and I look forward to an important conversation about this with my counterparts from across the country on Friday.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says more studying is being done to see if our province should pull out of the CPP. She also says a referendum would be held to gauge Albertans' interest in going with an Alberta pension plan. You know, many premiers are not happy that Atlantic Canada will be getting a break on the carbon tax for their home heating by the federal government. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Saskatchewan is also giving its residents a break on natural gas, but as for the other provinces, it may not be possible.
So about 85% of people who heat their home with natural gas in Saskatchewan are through Sask Energy. So the government-owned agency can do that if the government tells them to. So Mo can do this, and it's a bold move, but you've still got David Eby, the new Democrat Premier of British Columbia, saying, hey, wait a minute, this is unfair. Danielle Smith in Alberta, hey, this is unfair. Just this morning, Doug Ford in Ontario said, this is unfair. Like, scrap this. You've got to treat everyone fairly.
Mr. Lilly will also explain why he believes the Trudeau government may be changing its stance somewhat on the Israel-Hamas war. He'll have details coming up later in our program. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his government is extending the 5.7% cut to the gas tax until next summer. The province launched the cut in July of last year and has extended it several times since. The reduction will remain in effect until June 30th of 2024.
This extension will save the average household $260 per year since the tax cut was first introduced. That's money that goes back into people's pockets to help cover essential expenses, because we know every dollar counts. But friends, as inflationary pressures continue to strain household budgets, we need to do more. That's why last week I sent letters to the Governor of Bank of Canada and the Prime Minister, urging them to put a stop to the crushing, and I say crushing, interest rate hikes. Instead, we need to tackle the root causes of inflation so we can avoid these painful hikes in the future. Working together with our federal and provincial counterparts, we need to strengthen domestic supply chains.
Now, the Alberta government, meanwhile, is being applauded by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation for strengthening the Taxpayer Protection Act. The Alberta director of the CTF, Chris Sims, says if the province wants to introduce a general sales tax, it must hold a referendum first. She says this act is one of the strongest laws protecting taxpayers in North America.
So our late former Premier Ralph Klein first introduced the Taxpayer Protection Act here in Alberta back in 1995, and that is why we don't have a PST in Alberta. Period. So Alberta is the only province in all of Canada where we don't have to pay the PST on everything from washer dryers to used clothes to vehicles. So taxpayers wind up saving billions of dollars here per year. And that's because in order to impose a PST, they'd have to hold a referendum first. So what Premier Danielle Smith is now doing is expanding that protection, expanding that law, so that if her government ever tries to increase personal or business taxes, they're going to have to hold a referendum from the people.
Lethbridge police are looking for witnesses to a north side stabbing on Sunday. They say they received a call about 1:30 in the morning about an altercation at the Habisha Lounge along 23rd Street North. When they arrived, they found a 30-year-old victim who was stabbed multiple times. He was taken to hospital where he remains in stable condition. 4 males were initially arrested at the scene, but have since been released without charges. Police are asking if you saw the incident and can help them with their investigation to give them a call right away at 403-328-4444. A mobile mammography unit to check for breast cancer will be set up in Brockett, Alberta on November 8th and 9th. Officials with Alberta Health Services say women aged 45 to 74 are most at risk and are invited to come by for a screen test. AHS says a mammogram, which is an X-ray of the breast, has proven to be one of the most effective ways to detect breast cancer. Early detection allows for greater treatment options and a better chance for survival. To book an appointment, you're asked to call 1-800-667-0604. There's an organization in Lethbridge which is also helping to support women in a wide variety of ways, including before and after pregnancy. It's called Better Beginnings. Tammy Gamrosy is the coordinator with the group. She says they serve women from all walks of life and offer a wide range of supports.
The women that we serve come from all walks of life. And so very, very importantly, we offer non-judgmental support from nurses, dietitians, community advocates. When they come to see us on a monthly basis, we also provide incentives. So Walmart gift cards and farmers market coupons, just to help with healthy food choices. We also offer prenatal vitamins for mom and vitamin D for baby. And also lots of information and referrals to other agencies. We're very connected to a lot of other agencies in the area.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Tammy Gamrosy from Better Beginnings coming up later in our broadcast. Well, this is Halloween, and that means you'll be seeing many little visitors at your front door and possibly even some four-legged ones. But is incorporating your pet into your costume or into a costume a good idea? Skylar Plourde of Community Animal Services gives us some tips for keeping our furry friends from stressing out during All Hallows Eve.
This restrictive costume and a hat or a face covering or something like that can be very overstimulating to them. So really pay attention to your animal's behavior if you are, going to be using a costume. And if you are, use something that's loose fitting, not restricting to them, that constant opening and closing of the door and strangers. And so especially for dogs, that can be very overwhelming for them. The best place for all of your pets during this event is in a safe, comfortable, secure place at home.
Boy, my dog would tear those costumes apart. Wow. A new digital collection was unveiled at the University of Lethbridge on Tuesday afternoon, and it's kind of a spooky one. The Ghost Stories of Lethbridge has been in the works since the beginning of the year and is comprised of 19 recordings of ghost stories from local historian Belinda Crowson. She spoke at the University Library on Tuesday afternoon with a chilling story about the very building they were sitting and standing in.
This story takes place in the lower level here of the library. When this building was constructed, it is actually true that one of the workers died in the construction of this building. And people will report in the lower level here of the library seeing a man sitting in a chair watching them, staring at them as they're working. They often get worried enough that they will go to security and describe the man. And as they're describing him to security, security will often stop them and say, he looks like this, this, and this, doesn't he? And you're like, yeah, you've described him exactly. They're like, don't worry, we know who it is, and when you go back, he won't be there. And when they go back to their place to research, the man is gone. And he's always described sort of as just somebody who's watching out and being part of it. He's not in any way scary or dangerous, but just there as part of this building.
The man looks a bit like Alec Baldwin. Now, some of the other stories they have include the haunted farmhouse and the ghost of the Union train station. Well, we saw some mixed clouds today and above the freezing mark, which was nice. As for how tonight is shaping up for the trick-or-treaters, along with the rest of the week's forecast, details are coming right up. You know, there's no snow or rain in the forecast tonight for the little trick-or-treaters in Lethbridge. Just a few clouds are on tap with a low near -6. Wednesday, it should be partly cloudy with a high near 5 degrees. Thursday and Friday, warming up slightly to 9 degrees under a partly cloudy sky. Saturday, the mercury will drop a little down to 2 degrees. Sunday, there's a 30% chance of flurries developing with a high of +1. Monday, warming up to 8 degrees under a mainly cloudy sky. Now, looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 9 degrees with an average low of -4. The record high was 21 set way back in 1958, and the record low was a very cold -27 set back in 1984. The sun rose at 8:18 and set at 6:11. Let's see how the rest of Canada is looking for Wednesday now. It should be mainly cloudy and 10 degrees in Victoria, overcast and 11 for Vancouver. Expect a mixture of sun and cloud and 6 degrees in Edmonton. Calgary should be mainly sunny with a high of near 3 degrees. Overcast and -1 is on tap for Regina on Wednesday, mostly cloudy and 0 for Saskatoon. A good chance of flurries developing and a high of only -1 for Winnipeg. In the central part of our country, expect rain mixed with light flurries and a high near 6 degrees in Toronto. A good chance of flurries and +2 for Ottawa. A slight chance of flurries developing and 3 degrees is expected in Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it'll be mostly cloudy and 3 degrees in Fredericton. Periods of snow and +1 in Halifax. A good chance of showers developing and 5 degrees in Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect more clouds to roll in with a high near 6 degrees on Wednesday. For the second month in a row, Stats Canada says the economy stayed flat in August as higher interest rates, inflation, and forest fires continue to weigh heavily on the economy. An advance estimate says the economy continued to remain flat in September as well. For the third quarter, a preliminary estimate suggests the economy contracted at an annualized rate of 0.1%. One of the largest energy infrastructure projects in recent Canadian history is complete. TC Energy says it has finished installing pipes along the entire Coastal GasLink pipeline between Dawson Creek and Kitimat, British Columbia. The company says the mechanical completion of the $40 billion, 670-kilometer long project will be completed by the end of the year. Orkin Canada says Toronto is the rattiest city in Canada. The pest control company bases its rankings on the number of residential and commercial rodent treatment calls it's made between August of last year and July of this year. Vancouver came in as the second rattiest, followed by Burnaby, BC, Kelowna, and Mississauga. Orkin says rodents are looking for warmth this time of year, so it's a good idea for homeowners to seal cracks in walls and install weather stripping around windows and doors. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 16 points on the day to finish at 18,873. The Dow was up 123 points to 33,052. The S&P 500 was up 26 on the day to 4193, and the Nasdaq was up 61 points to 12,851. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.04 to 81.27 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 25 cents to 3.60 US. Gold was down $12.43 on the day to 1983.67 US an ounce, and silver was down 48 cents to 22.85 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.53 per bushel, barley's at $7.45, canola's at $15.50, and corn is at $8.64 per bushel. Live cattle were up 13 cents to 184.13. Feeder cattle November contract was up 3 cents to 237.70, and lean hogs December contract was up 55 cents to 71.73. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.07 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says she will be meeting with her provincial counterparts on Friday to discuss the impact of Alberta potentially pulling out of the Canada Pension Plan. Freeland says it's a bad move for Canada, and she says most Albertans agree with her. Premier Daniel Smith says more studying needs to be done on potentially pulling out of the CPP, along with holding a referendum on the subject. Could premiers in Canada follow the lead of Saskatchewan's Scott Moe and not collect a carbon tax on home heating next year? Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley will give us his thoughts to that question shortly. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, visit our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, visit lethseniors.com/volunteer drivers. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website, lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's today's Bridge City News community calendar.
As you've heard on Bridge City News, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax break is primarily aimed at Atlantic Canada. Many in the Atlantic provinces heat their homes with oil, and they say they really can't afford to pay the carbon tax with that fuel source this winter. But what about the rest of us, particularly here in Western Canada, who heat our homes with natural gas? Alberta's spoken out against the carbon tax on our natural gas bills, and so has Saskatchewan. In fact, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says his province will not collect the carbon tax on home heating beginning January the 1st, unless Trudeau gives all Canadians a break. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, is this even legal, and could other premiers maybe follow suit?
It would be hard for other premiers to follow suit on Scott Moe because let you in on a little secret. Despite having the Sask party in charge for a long time, Saskatchewan still has a lot of holdovers from their very socialist days. And so Sask Energy is a provincial crown corporation. You know, they've still got their provincial crown corporation that operates a telephone service, an internet service, and home heating. So about 85% of people who heat their home with natural gas in Saskatchewan are through Sask Energy. So the government-owned agency can do that if the government tells them to. But as Premier Danielle Smith said, after most brought this out, you know, it's private companies across Alberta. You know, you've got Direct Energy in Lethbridge, let's say. Here in Toronto, I've got Enbridge is the main supplier. You couldn't have the provincial government telling a private company to disobey a federal law. So that's kind of the position that we're in. So Mo can do this, and you know it's a bold move, but you've still got David Eby, the new Democrat Premier of British Columbia, saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this is unfair." Danielle Smith in Alberta, "Hey, this is unfair." Just this morning, Doug Ford in Ontario said, "This is unfair. Like, scrap this. You've got to treat everyone fairly." So Trudeau's getting an earful, and I just don't think this is going the way that he hoped, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a court challenge along the way.
Now, Brian, a Trudeau cabinet minister, Guy Hutchings, says if other parts of the country want to break on the carbon tax, they should elect more Liberals. Brian, that almost sounds like blackmail to me.
Yeah, it's called saying the quiet part out loud. This is them saying, "Hey, nice province you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Maybe you should be voting Liberal. Maybe you should get on the protection racket." Isn't that what it sounds like? Yeah. So Goody Hutchings is one of the Liberal MPs in Atlantic Canada that was facing the decimation of the party and the removal of her from her job if this change didn't happen. I'm not sure that this change is going to help Justin Trudeau in the polls, though. He continues to get hammered, and maybe he'll get back some support in Atlantic Canada, but the rest of the country is just scratching their heads. We've been told for 8 years now that the carbon tax is desperately needed. It's going to save the planet, and now it's not going to be applied to save Justin Trudeau's seats. As I've been saying, he had to make this change because his support was melting faster than polar ice caps.
Now, Brian, do you see this carbon tax issue on home heating as maybe another opportunity for Tory leader Pierre Poilievre?
This was a massive gift to Poilievre, in my view. He was flying down to Windsor, Nova Scotia, which is in the riding of King Hants. The Liberals have held it for about 20 years. It was Conservative blue before then. And he was holding a rally in the riding of Liberal MP Cody Blois, who introduced Trudeau at his carbon tax announcement. They, I think they had 1,000 people out. The next day, he was in St. John's, Newfoundland, talking about this as well. Trudeau's response when Poilievre has said, "Axe the tax," is to talk about how irresponsible that is, and don't you know the planet's on fire? And now he's axing the tax for people who vote for him. So, it shows that it's an unfair tax. It shows that Trudeau is willing to bend if it means votes. So he's not as pure as he wants you to believe. I think this is really going to help Pierre Poilievre over the coming months.
Brian, inflation and the high cost of living is something that we've all been battling for quite some time. But a surprise admission from Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem to an Alberta Conservative MP raised some eyebrows. Tell me more about that.
It was a Conservative finance critic, Jas Halan, who was questioning Macklem on, is government spending contributing to inflation? And what he got Macklem to say is that it would be good if monetary and fiscal policy were both rowing in the same direction. Now, fiscal policy is, of course, government spending. Monetary policy is the Bank of Canada and interest rates. And what have I been saying for about 2 years? What have economists been saying? That a contributing factor to inflation is the level of federal government spending. Mm-hmm. That having the Bank of Canada, John Manley put it well, the former Liberal finance minister, put it very well. He described it as the Bank of Canada is trying to jump on the brakes, but the federal finance minister and the Trudeau government is jumping on the gas, and they're trying to hit both of them really hard at the same time, and it doesn't work. Well, that's essentially what Tiff Macklem said in response to Jas Halan's questioning. he said they're not rowing in the same direction. Inflation has many factors going into it, and anyone saying it's all Justin Trudeau's fault is lying to you as much as anyone that says, well, it's all the fault of the war in Ukraine. That's what the Prime Minister's been trying to do. It's all global factors. We don't have a hand in this. Major bank economists have said it. Now his own Bank of Canada governor has said it. Just like a little while ago, he had to admit the carbon tax is an increasing part of inflation in this country. That's federal government policy right there.
You know, it's funny, you know, putting the foot on the brake and the gas at the same time, pumping them both, causes burnouts. And I tell you, a lot of Canadians are feeling the burnout right now, feeling burnt out. Brian, a surprise ruling for someone Monday that the federal court rejected a challenge to the 2020 gun ban decree by the Trudeau cabinet. What exactly was being challenged and what comes next?
If you recall, on May 1st, 2020, this is less than 2 weeks after the Nova Scotia mass shooting, the Trudeau government announced that they were taking the what they call military-style assault weapons off the streets, that these guns were designed just to kill the fastest number of people in the smallest amount of time. They described them as weapons of war. They had really overheated rhetoric on this, and they used the Nova Scotia mass shooting as the reason for it, even though by the time they made this announcement, they knew that the shooter had illegally imported his guns from the United States, that he had been subject to a court-ordered prohibition on owning or possessing guns. They knew that people had complained to the RCMP about him many times and nothing had been done. They knew all that. But they are determined to take as many guns away from licensed law-abiding Canadians as they can. So that's when they announced there's 1,500 types of guns. They're going to make them illegal. But of course, as we discussed a little while ago, they have no plan on how to get them out from people's gun safes and basements and so on. So the Canadian Centre for Firearms Rights, they challenged this, what's called Order in Council. It's basically a cabinet decree. It never passed legislation. It was simply a cabinet decree. They challenged it and said the government didn't follow proper procedure. They did not offer procedural fairness to firearms owners. And the judge in this case said there was no need for procedural fairness to be offered to law-abiding gun owners. This is going to get challenged all the way to the Supreme Court. Whether the Supreme Court will hear it, we don't know. But the Coalition for Firearms Rights has said they are going to challenge this further. It was a bizarre decision. I thought that there was a good chance that the CCFR could win. Unfortunately, they did not, and this will continue. But just recently, Justin Trudeau showed that this is all about politics. He imposed a ban on May 1st and gave an exemption. So that you weren't a criminal for having it in your basement, because he doesn't know how to get it off of you. Just 2 weeks ago, they extended the criminal exemption so people can keep these guns in their basements, in their gun safes, until October 30th, 2025. That's about 2 weeks after the next election. They are looking to campaign on this whenever we go to the polls, whether it's next week or in October 2025 as scheduled.
And what are the latest polls showing right now? The Tories have quite a comfortable lead, right? If an election was held today, it would be a landslide majority Conservative government?
It would be massive. The latest seat projections I've seen say that it would be about 205 seats, perhaps as high as 224.
Wow.
Now, I've had some people say Pierre Poilievre will win the biggest majority government ever. If he wins 205 seats, even 224, he would win the third largest majority government ever, and he'd be right behind Diefenbaker and Mulroney. And while I'm sure he'd like to be number one, he'd also take the third biggest majority ever. When Conservatives do win, they tend to win big in that fashion. And so Diefenbaker in 58, Mulroney in 84, they both got over 200 seats, but there were a lot fewer seats in the House of Commons back then.
Brian, Ontario's finance minister has called for an emergency national meeting to discuss Alberta's proposal to leave the Canada Pension Plan and go our own way with an Alberta pension plan. Is this Ontario interfering in Alberta policy?
Not really, because it's the Canada Pension Plan right now, and Alberta leaving would, of course, affect the whole country. So, every province except Quebec. So, of course, everyone's going to have different viewpoints. And look, I've made clear that if Quebec can have their own pension plan, then so can Alberta. Constitutionally, the pensions are the responsibility of the provinces. But it was back in the 1940s, I believe it was, that they decided to pool together and bring about it was a bit later, that they pulled together and made a national pension plan, Quebec deciding to keep its own. Bethel and Falvey would have a few concerns. One, what would the impact be on the overall pension plan, the national pension plan? Would it impact Ontario residents and the pension they receive? But also, that opening number from Premier Danielle Smith, that was a great negotiating tactic, but saying Alberta will take more than half of the Canada pension plan, that was never going to happen. And so, of course, he would want to argue about that, and he would want to have a say. Alberta, because of the age of its population and such, there is an argument to be made that they should, if they leave, get a number higher than their percentage of the population. But leaving with more than half, that's not going to pass any math teacher's grading system.
Brian, after initially offering strong support for Israel and its war with Hamas, there appears to be pressure inside of the Liberal Party to maybe go a different route. What route is that?
Well, there's been calls for from some MPs, I think it was 33 total, including 23 Liberals, who signed a letter calling for a ceasefire. Now, a ceasefire would mean both sides lay down their weapons. I'll say this, both the Prime Minister and his Defense Minister, Bill Blair, have said a ceasefire won't work. Blair was adamant. He said he doesn't think that Hamas would respect a ceasefire. He doesn't think that they would abide by it, and that Hamas must be eliminated. Trudeau has said similar words, that Hamas must be eliminated. But there is incredible pressure. There are divisions within the Liberal caucus with people saying the humanitarian crisis in Gaza can't be ignored. His Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, the other day called for a humanitarian truce. People said, well, wait a minute, a truce, is that just another way of saying a ceasefire? And they had to walk that back and say, no, we don't mean a ceasefire, but we want to pause to get humanitarian aid in. Even the Israeli government is taking time to ensure that humanitarian aid does go into the civilian population. They have posted what they have done. They have publicized what they've done, not just as a way to say, oh, look at me, aren't we great, while we're waging war against Hamas, but because they want to show that they are living up to legal obligations. So all of that to say that the Trudeau government is feeling pressure to go more towards the side of the people in Gaza. The problem is too many of the people making those calls, and we see it, some of the comments made on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery, some of the comments on the streets of Calgary, the streets of Toronto, Montreal, they are not pro-Palestinian. They are not in support of the people of Gaza. They are in support of Hamas. And that is a place that the Trudeau government can't go. So they're under pressure. I will give them kudos for walking the line so far. And I hope that they don't do what too many have done and come out quickly and support Israel. But as Ben Shapiro said to me recently, 2.5 seconds later, people have turned and they're against Israel. So far, they're not there, but there is a lot of pressure.
There's been a lot of steps taken in the past to combat Islamophobia in our country, but how about the anti-Semitism, which seems to be running rampant right now, Brian? What is Ottawa doing?
Right now, not a lot. Now, I do want to point out that the Prime Minister did denounce the anti-Semitism on display in Dagestan, in Russia, where, I don't know if you saw those video images, but people showed up at an airport and at hotels saying, basically, we want the Jews, give us the Jews. It's horrific images. And he's right to denounce that. But I want to hear him have something stronger to say on what's happening in our streets. That said, on Monday, he did meet with the families of hostages in Israel. They were there on Parliament Hill to meet with government officials and members of the opposition and make their case. And so it's a tough walk for politicians right now. And since I'm a regular critic of the Prime Minister, I may as well give him credit when it's due.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, there's an organization in Lethbridge which provides invaluable support for women who may be facing various challenges during a crucial stage of their lives, from those seeking health choices during pregnancy to women feeling alone or isolated, or those living on a low income or even facing language or cultural barriers. Better Beginnings is there to lend a helping hand. Tammy Gamrasi joins me to talk more about the work of Better Beginnings. Tammy, welcome to Bridge City News. Now, you are a registered nurse and you're actually the coordinator of Better Beginnings, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and it sounds like Better Beginnings does a whole heck of a lot. You offer so many services. And is this all free of charge to the client? It's through Alberta Health Services, right?
It is, yeah. So Better Beginnings is a fairly long-established program, been around for over 25 years now, and it is a free supportive health service.
Okay, awesome. Do you go through referrals? How do women actually hear about you initially?
It's a great question. Sort of a few different ways. So absolutely anyone can just call us directly to see if they do qualify. If you did call the program, what that would look like is a nurse would just answer the phone. She'd probably ask you a few questions about sort of like just what your circumstances are, ask you about your pregnancy, and then just make sure that you qualify and you're eligible for the program. And then from there, she would book you for an actual intake appointment. And at that intake appointment, that's where we would explain the program a little more in depth, get some more information from yourself, just so that we know moving forward how to put some more supports in place for you. We also get several referrals from other agencies, from other doctors' offices and nurses, of course, with clients' consent. Sometimes we get those calls. And so what that would look like is we would just call you back and again, go through that whole process and just ask you if you wanted to be part of the program. So again, it's completely voluntary as well. It's a free program, but it's also a voluntary program.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And are you only located in southwestern Alberta, or are there locations everywhere?
So Better Beginnings through AHS here is, so we're in the southwest area, which includes, of course, Lethbridge, Cardston, Coaldale, Crosens Pass, Fort McLeod, McGrath, Milk River, Picture Butte, Pincher Creek, Raymond, Tabor, and Vauxhall. So anywhere there's a public health office, there'll be a Better Beginnings nurse available there to reach out to. But there are other programs funded the same way throughout the province.
Right. Okay. No, well, that's good to know. And I know that you're definitely online, so people can go online and check it out. Now, how does it work? Do the women have to come to you, to your office? Can you meet, I guess, virtually, online? I know these days everything's online, but.
That's a good question. So we actually, once you do qualify for the program, everything is in person. So we have the women come to, so if it's Lethbridge, it would be the train station here. Or again, if it was a rural site, it would be that public health office there. So the whole point of the program is, that we support you in your pregnancy. And a lot of that is that face-to-face care, right? So yeah, it's definitely face-to-face.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so let's get into the specifics here of what your support actually is. So what sort of help can you offer pregnant or parenting women, I guess new moms?
That's a great question. So we, of course, offer lots of information on pregnancy and parenting, specifically, or very importantly, absolutely non-judgmental support. So the women that we serve come from all walks of life. And so very, very importantly, we offer non-judgmental support from nurses, dietitians, community advocates. When they come to see us on a monthly basis, we also provide incentives. So Walmart gift cards and farmers market coupons just to help with healthy food choices. We also offer prenatal vitamins for mom and vitamin D for baby. And also lots of information and referrals to other agencies. We're very connected to a lot of other agencies in the area. So lots of referrals as well. And also free pre and postnatal access.
Wow, oh, that's fabulous. What would you say is the most felt need by expectant moms when they come to Better Beginnings?
Ooh, that's a there's a lot.
I'm sure there's a gamut. Right?
There is really so who qualifies for the program is anyone who, so of course we see if you're a teenager, you qualify immediately for our program, no questions asked. So we also deal with women who, just are struggling social, emotionally, or physically, right? So living in low income, women who've already maybe had a premature baby, maybe they're at risk for poor nutrition. So they're having a hard time either financially or physically getting enough food to eat. Substance abuse. So if you're struggling with substance abuse, maybe a history of mental health disorders, new to Canada, even just limited social supports, just you're new to town, or maybe you are the first person in your whole family and your friends to have a baby and you don't really have a lot of support in your life, or even just wanting to cope with the stress of pregnancy. So we see a wide range of needs that come to us.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah, hard to pin that question down with one need, but there's a lot.
Oh, I can imagine. Okay, so what specific services do you offer women facing challenges related to low income? Do you have to be low income to qualify?
So lots of referrals, lots of help with setting them up with other support services that will kind of help follow them or help set them up with financial support. The financial support that we offer specifically here isn't large, right? It's not the Walmart gift cards and the farmers market coupons are certainly not enough to support themselves, but it's enough to just help out with maybe formula or baby supplies or whatever is going on for that mom. So it's a lot more referral-based services financially specifically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if a young lady comes to you seeking help like this, so what's the recommended starting point for her?
She can just call us. So wherever she is in the zone, just call the public health office and just say, I'd like to sign up for Better Beginnings. And from there, if she gets a voicemail or just someone will call her back and set up an intake appointment, again, to see if she qualifies and set up an intake appointment with her.
Okay, no, simple enough there. Okay, so how does Better Beginnings maybe address those language and cultural barriers to ensure that women from diverse backgrounds receive adequate support?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So of course, because we are HS and we provide service to, everybody in the province, we have access to language lines. So we have access to a multitude of translators through that. So we actually do see a lot of new Canadians in our program. And the way that looks is we actually contact language line with the language that we are needed. And we'll actually have an iPhone and we'll just have them on speakerphone. And so we can have that conversation happen right between us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I would imagine that you offer all kinds of assistance in making healthy choices during a pregnancy. And I believe that there's a dietitian involved, right? So maybe explain the dietitian's role in this Better Beginnings relationship with this young lady and how they provide nutrition advice to pregnant women.
So we are connected with Alberta Healthy Living Program, which is another program through Alberta Health Services. And so we have dietitians that we work with and we refer clients. Most of our clients, actually, we refer to the dietitians. And at that appointment, the dietitians can help that mom one-on-one, whatever her situation looks like. So it's not necessarily, sort of a set program that they'll go through with the moms. It's really client-led. And so whatever that mom is sort of struggling with or whatever she really wants to whatever information she needs regarding nutrition, whether it's for her own health or introducing solid food to baby or, anything like that. So we'll refer them for a one-on-one dietitian appointment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and changing your diet or lifestyle for the benefit of a baby coming into the world, it definitely requires a whole new way of thinking, especially if you're a brand new mom and have never experienced it before. So is there maybe some guidance or advice available to change the mother's focus to thinking about options and choices for not just herself, but for a new baby, I guess, coming into the world?
Yeah, well, and actually, I should say for talking to a registered dietitian, it doesn't just have to be a Better Beginnings client. Anyone who just wants to know more about healthy eating, pregnant or not pregnant, can access that, a dietitian at Alberta Healthy Living. But the new Canada Food Guide, if you've seen that updated food guide, it's really great. There's a lot more emphasis on a variety of healthy food or healthy vegetables and fruits, rather than just sort of set limiting food. So there's lots of different options that women can look at there.
Would this maybe also include changing the way of thinking and acting around the home as well? Do they offer guidance for that?
Yeah, all kinds of guidance, depending on what that looks like, right? And the reality of the situation, because for a lot of people, and it might just be, how do I access healthy food on a low budget? Because not everybody has the privilege of accessing healthy food, just buying a whole bunch of extra healthy food. So dietitians are very mindful of that as well, and just helping people access and change their diets, again, depending on their specific situation.
Yeah. How does Better Beginnings maybe help women who want to quit smoking during pregnancy? I would imagine that's really a tough one.
That's a really, really tough one. Often they'll make sure that they talk to their doctor about that conversation is a really strong one with their physician. There's also a program called Alberta Quits that will help refer women to that. Again, depending on where that woman is at and what level of readiness she is for quitting, they'll help her with that if that's where she's wanting to.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Are you able to share some success stories or examples of maybe how Better Beginnings has positively impacted the lives of pregnant women or new moms?
There is one I can think of. We did have a mom who came in, and this one always sort of sticks in my head. And when we first met her, she came to us transient, so she didn't have a home to live. From out of town, she came to Lethbridge, was dealing with addiction issues, mental health issues, and obviously no housing issues, income issues. Also had a warrant out for her arrest, so was sort of dealing with that. And she was, I believe, about 14 weeks pregnant on top of all that. So you can see how when we see clients, the pregnancy is a big part of it. There's also a lot of other things going on with that. So with that mom, a lot of our focus was really getting her supported with some one-on-one support, some home visitation support. Making sure that that advocate who was working with her helped advocate for her so that instead of going to jail, she went to treatment, because that's definitely a better place for someone who is having a baby. And just really worked with her addiction issues, of course, set up a dietitian appointment with her. And at that point, I remember her saying, we were talking about her diet and sort of where she was at that point. And she said, well, so far today, I had a banana and a Coke, and of course, non-judgmentally, that's where she's at. And she said, to be fair, when I was in the depths of addiction, that's what I would eat in a week.
Right.
So that's great. That's our starting point. And so she obviously saw a dietitian. We had her set up with a postpartum mental health therapist, who we also work with. And so just really put a lot of supports in her life. We're not here to really solve all of her problems one-on-one, but really as a community and the community supports we have, put all those supports in place for her. She also got free prenatal classes with us. So her and her partner were able to come to prenatal classes. And the nice thing about that is a lot of our staff actually the staff in Better Beginnings also teach those classes. And so that's a familiar face, right? And less intimidating to do a group when you know the nurse, you've talked to her for a little bit. So she did prenatal. She delivered a healthy, drug-free baby boy, exclusively breastfeeding. She ended up doing postnatal classes as well with us, and just began to sort of build a new community around her of other moms in those postnatal classes, and was still being supported really well through addiction and mental health. And so that mom, I saw her at when her baby was 6 months old, and she was talking about, going back to school. And so that's not everybody. We don't, depending on where people are at. But that's a really good example of someone coming to us with a multitude of other things going on in her life. And the pregnancy is important, but getting a lot of those other factors in her life sorted out first is just as important.
Oh, absolutely. What a fabulous success story that is. That's just wonderful. And what a wonderful program that you're coordinating there. And it looks like we are unfortunately out of time here. But Tammy, thanks so much for spending some time with us today to explain what this wonderful program is all about.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. That was Tammy Gamrasy of Better Beginnings, and non-judgmental supportive health services for pregnant or parenting women through Alberta Health Services. And she, of course, is the coordinator of that program and a registered nurse. So happy to have her on today. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.